Hi, Dave here, and today we're going to check out the work of Muyang Xu. He's based in China, a concept artist slash environment artist, and he doesn't have a lot of pieces on his ArtStation portfolio, but they're pretty high quality, I would say, and I would actually put him in the category of Ru Xinggao and Liang Mark, because both of them are actually environment artists as well, and maybe even he's a bit of he's kind of like Greg Rutkowski as well, where they have that kind of gritty, opaque kind of look. So yeah, but I think he's more of a Liang Mark, Ru Xinggao kind of guy, right? So I would put these three guys together: Muyang Xu, Ru Xinggao, and Liang Mark, which I did do art reviews of, so you can just check it out in my playlist of art reviews. So anyway, he does bring his work to a more finished kind of level. I'm not sure if he does use 3D. Based on his kind of tags on his ArtStation, he just kind of puts his work under digital 2D, so fuck. And it's actually kind of impressive because his work tends to be kind of clean, right? You can tell by the edges, even if you can see like the brush strokes within each kind of shape. Like the edges of the shape itself is pretty clean, and it does give that kind of finished look. So I don't know, he's not very impressionistic, right? He's very kind of he's more of an illustration or illustrator, I guess, where he does know how to refine things to a more presentable level. He's not kind of like a splash art kind of guy. He's more of an illustrator. Shit, they're kind of the same thing, right? But fuck me. Like his work does have a very kind of gritty kind of feel. It's not like soft in a sense. It doesn't have like a rendered look. It just has a very kind of not rough, but a very sharp kind of gritty look. Now this one's pretty gritty, like pretty sharp. And you can actually see a bit of that brush spacing, I would say, I think, right? It kind of reminds me of what's his name? I did an art review of this guy. He's very good in terms of perspective. Like he does a lot of environments as well. But yeah. So obviously you can tell he does layer his environments, because it wouldn't make sense if, if it did this all in kind of one layer, right? Kind of like Feng Zhu does, where it's a bit more raw and straight to the point. And gosh, and I'm kind of wondering if he would ever like post videos of his process online, just because I do like the way his work looks, kind of like Ru Xinggao. If only he had like process videos, I think it would really help the art community. And it almost feels like he did use some 3D for the architecture, but again, in his tags on ArtStation, he puts his work under the hashtag digital 2D, so fuck. And yeah. So maybe he does, I'm guessing maybe he would bash like a few photos in just for some parts, and then he would paint over them, obviously, but it's kind of hard to say. And his perspective game is pretty cool, kind of like the guy I'm trying to reference, but I just can't seem to recall. Yeah. This is pretty simple, kind of reminds me of Star Wars just because of the shape of this kind of ship, right? And apparently a lot of his recent work is just like practice, like they're kind of practice paintings or illustrations, but they're not really practice in a way, just because, I mean, it is a kind of practice, I guess, just because maybe he's focusing more on trying to finish things, maybe. Like I don't see a lot of sketches in his work or in his portfolio, so that's kind of interesting. Maybe this is what he's just trying to advertise to the world, that he's just this kind of guy. He likes to kind of bring things to a more finished level or look, right? But if you're kind of focusing on the foreground, you can actually see a bit of that brush spacing. So it gets kind of simplistic in a way, but it does get obviously way more refined in the area of focus. And that's going to be this ship, right? And I'm trying to find some kind of color dynamics here, because there is this setting, this brush setting, where if you set it, or if you turn it on, it's under the color dynamics section. It's the apply per tip. You can kind of make texture kind of just by painting. Yeah, no shit. Like it generates its own texture and it can make your work more kind of opaque, right? And I actually found or realized this first with the work of Greg Rutkowski. I did buy his oil brushes and it does make your paintings look more solid and less kind of digital-ish, right? So I would always recommend or try. I would recommend people to try that kind of option in Photoshop. Yeah. The perspective is pretty cool. Very, very skewed, very, very dynamic, which I like. And again, you can see here in his work the color dynamic setting being turned on, right? The apply per tip option is kind of turned on. And you can always play with the settings, with the brightness, with the hue and saturation, right? I think. But look at how clean the edges are, right? And he even adds this kind of noise thing. He doesn't use a soft brush. He uses a noise brush of some kind. And I think after he does like the whole illustration, he'll actually sharpen it. I'm basing this off just looking at his work. It does have a bit of that slight sharpness, right? It's a great way to kind of finish your painting session. Especially if you're doing some kind of environment. It kind of puts everything, or kind of tidy things, tidy as fuck. It's a great way to tidy things up, right? Or to kind of just, yeah, fuck, dumb. Anyway, and I'm not sure how he does his colors, right? Maybe he does start in a grayscale fashion, or maybe he'll just kind of wing it as he goes. But yeah, again, you can tell he does most likely layer his environments just because it helps save time, right? Like even in his kind of background here, you can still see that kind of sharpness in the overall silhouette of the architecture, right? Architecture, texture. Yeah. Well, I do think he does photo bash. Maybe a bit of photo texturing, right? Just to add a bit of texture, right? And yeah. Anyway. Oof. So here the perspective is kind of you're seeing it from above, right? And he has a pretty consistent way of painting. Like he paints the characters the same way he paints his environments. So they have this kind of he has one solid style in his portfolio, like one consistent style. So that actually makes him very memorable, I would say, and dependable, just because he has proven his abilities, right? And here again, you can see that noise brush being used. And you can see it even more because I think he does sharpen everything eventually. And here you can see that color dynamics, right? I'm not sure if this is some kind of photo texture being applied or blended in. And he doesn't have to finish everything. You can still see the kind of rawness in his edges. Like even this whole rock thing here, this kind of pillar, it's a bit kind of raw and basic. It's a bit too sharp here. Because maybe it's not necessarily the main focus. So you can always kind of simplify things as you kind of go away from the main thing. And the main thing here would most likely be this flow of individuals, right? Just stepping down or being in this path, right? Yeah. Fuck me. And he has a very kind of gouache look, or a gouache kind of painting approach, where he breaks down the values by shapes, and you can actually see the kind of like a simplified cut. It's almost as if you're using the cutout filter in Photoshop. He's very similar to Li Yang Mark in this way. Ooh. Awesome piece. I do love the folds here of this kind of statue, right? And in this statue, it does get a bit more simple. And look at the way he did the reflected lighting here, right? You can see a bit of the blues coming from the sky, I'm assuming, and some oranges coming from, say, this kind of bridge, or maybe there's a kind of mountainside in the kind of off screen, right? Very, very cool. You can even see it here under this kind of bridge, right? Wow. And look at the way he did the clouds. Very, very dynamic. It's not necessarily, it's a bit stylized, obviously. It's not super realistic. And based off of his work, he's very focused on mostly fantasy types of environments. Now this one is a sci-fi, obviously, right? I think. So he's more of a fantasy kind of person. And look at the way he did the water here. Very, very simple. Almost graphical in nature, right? And the architecture, he's a great designer as well, right? Like his designs have that consistency in them. Like it actually feels like each element kind of belongs to a kind of world that makes sense, you know? Like nothing seems out of place, I'll say that, right? And I'm kind of scared of using a lot of colors like he's using, like he's kind of doing in this kind of piece, just because I don't really know. I'm not very experienced with, because the fear is to use too many colors or too many hues, and it can kind of lead to an oversaturated kind of piece, and it can often kind of take away from the main idea or the main story. So, but Muyang Xu is, it's pretty good at making very flamboyant, interesting pieces. Even the way he does the shadows, right? Very, very cool. You can see in these kind of flags, right? Or fabrics. Fuck. You can see this area of, like, you can see where the light is being kind of casted on. Fuck. And where the shadow part is, right? And even the shadows do have the kind of purplish bluish tint, so that's pretty cool. Even though it's a stylized way of painting, there's always that sense of realism. Like it feels like it's an actual environment, right? Anyway, ew. Now this one's more of a shit. I guess it's a sci-fi, right? Because I can see a bit of some mech design here, right? Some kind of it's a mix of both, like not both, but I think it's more sci-fi, but it does have like a basis on traditional architecture. It's hard to pinpoint. I can see a bit of Asian influence here, right? But because of the domes, it feels like Roman-esque, right? Like Western kind of domes, not Muslim domes, but kind of Western types of domes, right? Anyway, yeah. And again, look at, I don't think he does. Oh, you can still see that kind of color dynamic setting being used here, and it does help add a bit of variety, right, to your if you're doing like large planes or large areas where it's just kind of like a flat shape or a basic shape, it can add enough variety to make it look more filled up, right? So it won't look as boring and very graphical, you know? So yeah. And again, look at the way he does the lighting here, right? And the shadows. And it's often not a clear cut, like the edges of, or like the edge, like where the light and the shadow meet, that edge isn't always kind of clear cut. There's always a kind of mid ground, where they kind of blend, right? And shift. I'm trying to be smart here and break down his work, but yeah. And again, look at the way he paints. It's not like he doesn't use like the basic round brush. He doesn't build up the paint. It's very kind of raw and opaque, like Darek Zabrocki, Greg Rutkowski, Aru Gao, and Liang Mark, right? Now this one's more of a sci-fi. Reminds me a bit of what's his name? John Wallen Liberto, one of my favorite artists. Just because of the design and the colors being used. Again, look at how this piece is filled with a lot of hues, but it's not blinding you with the hues or the entire kind of rainbow. I mean, it's pretty much present in this whole piece, but he knows how to tone things down, right? And you can tell in the background as you kind of go further out, it gets a bit desaturated, right? And obviously, since this vehicle is kind of the main thing here, it does have a bit more saturation in it, right? Very, very cool. I love the way he did the stars. Reminds me a bit of like the way he did the sky and like the galaxy here, or the stars. Reminds me a bit of not Sparth, but oh yeah, Sid Mead. It has a kind of futuristic retro kind of look, right? And look at the way he did this building in the background. It's just two values, the shadow and the light, right? Very, very interesting, right? Now this one does remind me a bit of Muslim Islamic architecture, right? Just because of the geometry being used and the very sharp apex in the arcs, right? And the spires at the very apex of the dome, right? It's kind of a mix between Islamic and Gothic architecture. It leans more towards the Islamic kind of realm, but yeah. But the environment feels kind of Greek-ish, right? Because whenever I see Greek, like modern Greek architecture, where they have like white apartments, not apartments, but like houses and shit, kind of near some kind of cliffside, right? Like modern Greek architecture homes, right? Now for this piece, it's actually not that finished. You can tell by the edges, it's a bit raw, kind of impressionistic, right? Kind of, but it's very, very presentable to me, I would say. Even the way he did the sky, it's still not very finished, but it makes sense, you know? And he loves to play with the shadows a lot and the light, you know? Like it actually feels like it's like a solid 3D thing. And yeah. This piece reminds me a bit of Darek Zabrocki, because Darek Zabrocki likes, not just because of the opaque kind of painting style, but in terms of like the architecture, Darek Zabrocki has a thing for Gothic architecture and gargoyles. He loves his gargoyles. So yeah, very, very cool. So it's kind of I think it's a fantasy piece, and you can tell he just kind of reflected everything here, or copied it, reversed it, and kind of just blurred it, maybe with some motion blur. Yeah. Now another sci-fi piece here, right? And he does have like breakdowns of this thing, which is nice. Let's explore some of them if we can. There you go. So even this, maybe I don't think this is his first sketch. This could be like a more refined sketch. Maybe he had like a rough sketch in the beginning, but then again, this could be like a very rough sketch. The point is, the sketch isn't even that like he's not a line work kind of person, you know, because there are some people there that are very into the whole line work thing, which I'm not a fan of. Even Feng Zhu, he does do line work, but if you just see his actual line work, it's not that clean. It's kind of messy, but eventually as he kind of paints over it, he does the refining in the painting process, you know? You can always use the line work phase to just establish like the edges, like the rough edges, and then you can just figure things out as you kind of go through your painting process, right? And at this stage, the line work basically disappeared, right? But the lighting, the values are kind of pretty much set. It's not clean. The edges definitely are not clean. But it kind of makes sense from afar. And I do think he did bash a few things in, like photo bashed a few parts in. Just my guess to help save time. But again, it does have a very rough, gritty kind of look. Some texture brushes here and there. And oh, he did change the background here a bit, right? He added the sky, right? With a bit of architecture in the background, some ships. It kind of reminds me a bit of Ruanjia, just a bit, right? Especially with this ship, like the way it's kind of painted, refined. Yeah. Awesome. This one's obviously a fantasy piece, very, very East Asian. Chinese, I'm assuming, just because of the attire and the architecture, right? I'm not sure if he does use like a mixer brush of some kind. Hard to say. Maybe a bit for the clouds. Or maybe not a mixer brush, but perhaps a smudge tool. Because I can see some paint being dragged around a bit in the leaves sometimes. And again, his play of like the way he plays with the lights and the shadows, like it's kind of like a 50-50 more often than not, right? You can see this kind of area of light and then shadow, area in shadow, a bit of light here, shadow, light, shadow, you know? Like it's kind of evenly dispersed, and it's kind of hot. I look at the way he did the edges of this kind of shadow, right? Where the light meets the shadow. It's not going to be a clear-cut edge. There's going to be like something in between. And sometimes it's a different color, I've noticed. I like the way he did the leaves here. The fallen leaves, right? Very, very cool. I look at the reflected lighting in the bottom of these small architectural elements here. I forgot what this thing is called. It's kind of like an entranceway. There's a formal term for it in architecture where you have like two posts and they call them on top. Fuck me. And again, I do like that kind of gritty look. It's kind of sharp, right? It's very, very painterly, very, very opaque. Yeah. Ew, this one is more... these are pieces inspired by the Game of Thrones series, according to Muyang. I think it's playing with the lighting for each piece. Same concept, but he's kind of exploring different lighting scenarios. So this is kind of the screenshot from the film, and then he kind of just painted over it, right? It's actually a pretty interesting skill to have, to be able to have one concept and generate different lighting, mood, sequences from that one shot, right? Look at the clouds, well done. Even the waves, damn. Some more East Asian traditional concepts. Let's check out the process here. Kind of like, it's not a totally rough sketch. Maybe he did have, again, a very kind of rough sketch. And then this is more of a formal sketch, right? It's not clean line work, but it's kind of like it's enough to start a painting, right? Obviously, I can't read Chinese or Mandarin, right? Whatever. Shit. What do you call the characters in Chinese? Fuck. I'm actually part Chinese, but I'm obviously one of the lesser ones. the impure ones. So basic line work, underpainting, right? Just setting the mood, setting the main hues, the foliage, the architecture, where the light is going to hit, right? So the light is going to hit somewhere behind this chick, right? Again, in this stage, it's still kind of painting under the line work. And he's still pretty much doing the same thing. Oh, look at that bit of light here. Wow. Wow. Again, look at how the edge where the light and the shadow meet. There's always that kind of bit of mid-ground, that kind of liminal area where the color may shift a bit, or sometimes it'll blur in some way, right? Very, very interesting. Again, it's still under the line work, right? And look at the brushes he's using. Very, very textured, opaque looking brushes. And at this stage, he pretty much painted over the line work, or he just kind of turned it off perhaps, and started like going raw and shit. So I don't see a lot of photo bashing. I'm guessing he just painted everything. What a mad lad. Anyway, so he did refine the chick more, a bit more contrast compared to this version, right? And he did add a kid, right? And then he did add this kind of post with the column on top to kind of help frame the shot, right? It's more of a compositional kind of thing. It's not necessary in any way, but you know, it helps add a bit of umph. But then again, you kind of covered this whole piece here, but you know, for as long as the story kind of is there, I don't think it's a problem. Right. So that's it for this art review of Muyang Xu or Zhu. I do recommend you follow him on ArtStation, and I don't think he has like a lot of links. He has not provided a summary, so that's kind of sad. But I do recommend his work. Very, very interesting. If you're an opaque kind of painter, kind of like Dag Zabrocki, Liang Mark, Greg Rutkowski, or Rusing Gao, or yeah, I would recommend you check out Muyang Xu's work, just because, you know, he's one of the top dogs, I would say. Like he does help. He helps to set a certain standard in the art community, right? In terms of how far you can go for this kind of style. So yeah, thank you for watching. Keep drawing, keep painting, and stay free.